And joining me to discuss Barack Obama's State of the Union address is the president and founder of the New Democrat Network, Simon Rosenberg, and from Madison, Wisconsin, John Nichols, Washington correspondent for The Nation magazine. Simon Rosenberg, first of all, once again, he gives a good speech, particularly on gun control, very stirring.
Yeah.
But then when you take a closer look, it doesn't seem to add up. In fact, on several occasions, it seemed like he was contradicting himself sometimes in the same paragraph. Is this just business as usual, then?
No, I mean, I thought the contrast last night between the sort of pragmatic speech that he gave, dealing, I think, in a very modern way with the challenges that are in front of us, and sort of the very reactionary and ideological and almost comical speech given by Marco Rubio, created this incredible contrast between
the Republican
response.
Yeah.
You know, that Barack Obama is working very hard to try to deal with, in a pragmatic way, with what's in front of him: globalization, the great geopolitical challenges in front of the country today. And so I feel that it was a very responsive speech to the historical moment that we were in, and a good one for the country.
All right, well, let's get straight to some specifics, and let's begin with climate change. This is what President Obama, this is how he began his comments about climate change.
If Congress won't act soon to protect future generations, I will. I will direct my cabinet to come up with executive actions we can take now and in the future to reduce pollution, prepare our communities for the consequences of climate change, and speed the transition to more sustainable sources of energy.
But then he also added this.
The natural gas boom has led to cleaner power and greater energy independence. We need to encourage that. That's why my administration will keep cutting red tape and speeding up new oil and gas permits. That's got to be part of an all-of-the-above plan. But I also want to work with this Congress to encourage the research and technology that helps natural gas burn even cleaner and protects our air and our water.
John Nichols, I mean, is this pragmatism, or is it simply holding two contradictory thoughts in his head at the same time?
It's absolutely holding two contradictory thoughts in his head at the same time. And in a sense, this is something that we do ask presidents to do. We ask them often in the international stage to be great moral leaders, but also to make very tough, sometimes pragmatic and unpleasant decisions. The same is true in domestic policy. In this speech, you saw really the two sides of Barack Obama. A president who was raised in a very progressive tradition, who has read the books that progressives have read and knows the thinking on a lot of things and wants to be a great progressive president. By the same token, he is a politician, and he's conscious of the fact he has a Republican Congress to deal with and a country that isn't always with him on every issue. And so you do see that soaring rhetoric that asks Americans to go with him to bolder, better places. And then when you get into the specifics, sort of a, well, we don't have to go there all that fast, and if you don't want to go, it's okay, I can work with you on it. It is a jarring contrast at times, and you did see it on the climate change issue, but frankly, quite a few others as well.
And we'll get on to some other topics in a moment, but Simon, particularly on climate change, it's one of those where, and as Barack Obama said, you know, he understands the science, he says, and how urgent this is. That's one then where you can't necessarily then have a contradictory policy on drilling, baby, drilling. You either understand the science or you don't, and one is incompatible with the other.
I don't really agree, and the reason why is that I think that pragmatically, right, he said hasten this transition to a renewable future. Look, this president has invested more in renewable energy than any American president in our history. We've seen a doubling of solar capacity, wind capacity is way up. He has hastened this transition. What's also true, though, the competing pressure is that America wants to be liberated from our dependence upon, in the short term, on foreign sources of energy, particularly oil from the Middle East. And
well, you're never going to be, you know,
in the short term,
independent from the the global price of oil. That's the whole way that is
I
framed.
Understand. It's not about the price. I said it's about you know, our experience in foreign policy in the Middle East over the last generation has not been a terribly successful one for our country. I think there is a hunger in the United States to have greater control of our energy destiny. I think we want lower costs, more independence, and more renewables. I think that is a strategy, and I think for the first time, I think America actually has an energy strategy that is comprehensive, all the above, and I think it is standing us in good stead right now.
But John Nichols, the urgency that the President alluded to was the fact that we are on the verge of destroying the planet irrevocably. I mean, again, that's why it's slightly different from these foreign policy thoughts. But I mean, he talks about some executive actions he might take. Is that at least plausible, though?
Yeah, I mean, this is where it gets very interesting. The President did detail events that Americans have experienced in the last couple of years, which will tell even the most skeptical citizen that there are problems. Our climate is changing. The science is, not something worked out in an ivory tower. It's reality on the streets of New York City as floodwaters pour in. And so it was quite dramatic in that regard. And I think that he is sincere in his recognition that something has to be done. I just don't think that he's somebody who wants to close off all his options. Now, the fascinating thing is that what he suggested to Congress was real. He has the power through his administrative actions, through executive orders, to do an immense amount to address climate change, to put real regulations and strictures on. But he is asking Congress to work with him. It's a fascinating dynamic. He's essentially saying to the Republicans, look, I know you've built a politics on denying climate change. You need to change. You need to work with me on addressing it, or I will go around you. And that was a fascinating statement. I think it sets up some real fights over the coming year.
Well, not just with Republicans, but Democrats, too, though, especially in coal states.
Democratic mining states, especially.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll keep an eye on that. Let's move on to the economy. Jobs. I think a lot of progressives would have been heartened to see him say, look, the deficit can't be the only focus of economic policy at the very least. How serious were the sort of proposals he was making, Simon? How likely are we to see them enacted?
I thought one of the most interesting phrases last night was the line about the North Star, and how the North Star for him and his second term is going to be about the ability of the middle class to get ahead. He made that pretty clear. I mean, that he wanted to be evaluated as a president by whether or not everyday people were going to do better in his second term than they did in the first term. And then he laid out a series of pretty significant proposals. I mean, ones that were not foreshadowed, that we didn't know were coming, including raising the minimum wage, which I'm sure set the Republicans' hair on fire in the chamber when he said it last night. And I think, to me, one of the most powerful things that he did is he kept coming back to education and skills and the need to equip our workers and our kids with better tools than they have to compete in a more global economy. I felt he was, more so than any time in his presidency, started to take responsibility for the economic challenges that we face and really trying to deal with it in a comprehensive way.
And that's, again, where